Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to create an assembly that contains two parts. It's an assembly of a wheel, and it has two parts. One is a tyre and one is a rim, and it's going to look something like that. Yours will look slightly different because you can put some design elements into it. What you'll need to do first is to open up an assembly file that I've already created. So if you go open, the assembly file is called wheel assembly. And once you've opened that up, you'll see that there's actually a sketch already in this assembly file. You'll note there's no parts in the assembly file, there's just a sketch. This is an assembly sketch, okay, so it doesn't belong to any parts, it's just an assembly sketch. So the reason for doing this is because we're going to use this assembly sketch to create two new parts. What we'll do first is we'll insert two new parts into the assembly. So if we go to Insert Component, New Part, and we do that twice, so we'll have two components in there. Insert Component, New Part, and what we'll do is rename both these parts. So the first one we'll call just simply the rim, and the second one we'll call the tyre. So we're going to make the rim first, and the way of what we need to do first is open up this part. So you can open up parts within an assembly. If you right click on the part and go Edit Part, you'll see that all the not that there's much in there at the moment, but what is in there has the text has turned to blue, so that is how you know that you're editing that particular part. And you can see Edit Component up the top here has been pressed. So the first thing is to create some sketch elements on the front plane. So we'll open up a sketch on that front plane. What we're going to do is we're going to use these sketch elements that are contained in this wheel assembly driving sketch. Now what we could do is we could just go through and select all these and then convert them, select everything we want and then convert them. The easiest thing to do is just to simply select the sketch from the feature manager tree, go to Convert Entities, and what that will do is convert everything from that sketch. It's easier to do this and then to delete the bits that we don't want than it is to select individually, so that's the reason why I've done it this way. Okay, so now these are the elements that make up the rim, and the only thing we need to do now is just to create a center line to revolve around. So from the origin, we'll make a horizontal line that's going to be our axis of revolution. So to create that rim, we need to go to Revolved Boss Base, and because there's only one center line, it knows that's the one we need, and we just revolve that through 360 degrees, and then that's the basic shape for our rim. We're just going to do one more thing to this rim. We're going to create some cutouts, and so the way we do that is to draw it on the right plane. Now the right plane goes through the middle of this part, so when we do a cut extrude, we're going to have to cut and extrude in two directions. Now it's up to you what shape you create these, use for these holes. I'm just going to make a fairly simple ellipse type shape and use that as the holes. But it's up to you. You can be a bit of a designer here and design yourself something. Just make sure that what you do is fully defined. So in this case, I'm going to just create an ellipse at an angle. Make sure that the position, as I said before, the two things that are important here are the size of the thing that you're drawing up and also the position. So you need to make sure that you've got dimensions sufficient so that they'll cover both size and position. Okay, so that's the shape that I'm going to use, and as I said before, because that's in the center, we want to do a cut through all, and do it in both directions. So that's the single one of the shape. What we need to do now is to make a circular pattern of that particular part, that particular feature. So what we need to do is to select obviously the center of rotation, and as we've done in the past, selecting a cylindrical surface, which was the outside of the rim, is sufficient. I think 28 is probably a few too many. Let's drop that back to 7, call it 8, no 7. For some reason wheels always have an uneven number of spokes, not always but most of the time. Someone explained to me why that was once, but I can't remember, so there you go, a bit of trivia. Okay, last thing we'll just do on the wheel is we'll put a another pattern, but this time around we're going to make a sketch on this face because it's a flat face, and we're going to make a pattern for the wheel nut studs. So again, we need to put dimensions on this. I'm going to make that 13 diameter, and I'm going to make that 33 away from the origin, and I'm just going to put a center line going from the center of the circle down to the origin, which is automatically it's got an automatic relation of vertical on there, so that fixes that in position. Now this time, rather than making a cut extrusion and then making a circular pattern from that cut extrusion, what we're going to use is we're going to make a circular sketch pattern. This circular sketch pattern menu item is found underneath the linear sketch pattern button. So select that. Now the first thing you'll need to do is to go down to where it says entities to pattern and just select your circle. By default it will put the center of rotation on the origin, and hit OK. Now you'll see that the sketch pattern is undefined at the moment, so you can grab one of these, one of the sketch patterns, and drag it around, and you'll see that it'll go all over the place. What you need to do is to locate the center of your sketch pattern on the origin. So just drag it and drop it back on the origin, and we'll see it's there. Now if you want to make some changes to it, I actually want to have a 6-hole pattern here. You can just simply edit that the number of instances. So let's turn that to 6, hit OK, and now we have a sketch pattern with 6 circles which are located around the origin of our part. Now what we want to do is to just create a cut extrude, and let's do through all. So what we've done here is exactly the same. We've achieved exactly the same thing as creating a single cut extrude and then using a feature pattern. In this case though, we've used a sketch pattern. In this instance it's probably the same, probably just as easy to use either, but I'd like you to do it both ways just to get some experience in that. There are times when it's actually better to use one and not the other, and that'll be obvious on the model that you're creating. So that's pretty much it for the rim for now. As you can see, as I mentioned before, when we're editing the rim feature component within the assembly, that will be blue. What we want to do is to now edit the tire component, and so we need to exit the component, the rim component, and we need to select the tire and go edit component. So now we're editing the tire component, which of course has nothing in it at the moment. And what we need to do is we need to use the driving sketch, that's this one down here, the assembly sketch, and we're going to use that to create a sketch in our tire component. So the way we're going to do that is we'll select the front plane, create a sketch, and again the easiest thing to do is to select this sketch and convert all the entities in that sketch, and then just delete the entities that we don't want. It's a bit quicker to do it that way around than selecting individual entities. So I'll just complete this, and we just need to trim this line here. So now what we're left with is the profile of the tyre, and it's a continuous closed profile. So that's the reason why I had to trim that little bit in the middle, because that would have left us with a profile which wasn't continuous. And the final thing I need to do for this sketch is to create a center line from the origin horizontally, which will become our center of rotation. So now we go to revolve boss base and revolve that through 360 degrees, and there we have our tyre. So the only other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the material of the tyre to rubber, so that it looks a bit more realistic. And we're going to put some features on this this tyre. We're going to put some cuts, and again we're going to use the we're going to make one cut, and then we're going to mirror that, and then we're going to do a circular pattern on those cuts in the tyre. So this is the tread that we're creating on the tyre. Now in order to do that, we need to have a plane which is outside of the tyre, because we need to do a cut extrude down onto the face of the tyre. So to do that, we need to insert reference geometry plane, and we're going to create a plane that's outside that tyre area. So okay, doesn't matter where it is as long as it's outside that area, so that dimension is not particularly critical. Okay, once we've got that plane, we're going to create a sketch on our new plane, and in order to create the tread pattern, we're going to use a spline for that. Now I'm going to use a fairly simple spline, just with 3 points. The reason for this is that using more points just makes it more difficult to dimension, and we can get enough, we can get the shape we want from a 3-point spline. So we're going to start on the origin, and the end must be coincident with the outside edge of the tyre. So we select the outside edge, we select the end of the spline, and use the coincident constraint for that. Now we can now modify this spline to roughly how we want it to be. We need to put some dimensions on the ends of this line, so we need to put a dimension. We have the vertical, we have the horizontal dimension defined by the edge of the tyre. Now we need to just have a vertical dimension to define that end point, so let's call that 40. What I'm going to do for the center point of this spline is a little bit different. I'm going to create a line, a bit of construction geometry that goes from the origin to the outside edge of the tyre, and then I'm going to create another line which goes from the center point of that construction line and goes down vertically. So now that creates a line which is basically a quarter of the way in from the edge of the tyre. I'm going to select my midpoint of the spline, and I'm going to select that center line, and I'm going to make them coincident. The reason I'm doing it this way is because later we're going to increase the width of the tyre, and we want to maintain this point at a point which is a quarter of the way into the tyre. The last thing we need to do is to create a vertical position for that line, and we're just going to do that, call that 25, and now we have our fully defined or nearly fully defined spline. There is some flexibility in it still. So what we want to do with this is we want to make that start point horizontal. So if we select the end of that little drag arrow, and if we go over to the add relations and just make that horizontal, then this point can still move, but that will always be horizontal. We're going to do the same thing with this end of the line. We're going to make that horizontal as well. Okay, so we've just done one side. We want to make this this line symmetrical, so I'll make a vertical construction line from the origin and select both that line and the spline and mirror those entities so that we have a symmetrical spline on both sides. Now we're going to use this sketch to create a cut extrude, and normally we need to have a closed profile to make a cut extrude, except that there are ways around it. We can use an open profile like this if we use what's known as a thin feature cut. So if we go to cut extrude, we can and select thin feature down here. We've got a couple of options. We can do in one direction or mid plane, or in two directions. We just want one direction. We're going to cut, instead of going through all, which tends to be the default, we want to do offset from surface. Now we need to select a surface. We're going to select this surface here, and we just want to rotate it around and make sure, using the reverse offset, just toggle that, make sure that it's actually cutting into that surface. Hit OK, and now we have one instance of that tread pattern. What we're going to do next is to make a circular pattern of that tread, and we're going to select our cut extrude. We need to select the axis of rotation, and in order to do that we can either select an axis or we can select a cylindrical face, and the cylindrical face that's easiest to select is the outside edge of the tyre. Hit OK. Now we can vary the number of instances. I'll leave that up to you. Hit OK, and we should now have our tread pattern, and our tyre is pretty much complete. Now we're still in the editing mode for the tyre. We need to exit that, so just click on edit mode. Now we're back into assembly mode. The final thing we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of configurations of this tyre. So if we go to the configuration manager, select that, we're going to add another configuration. So right click on the wheel assembly configuration, go to add configuration, and we're going to call this one 250 wide, and we're going to make this tyre and the rim 250 millimeters wide. The way we do that is we go to our driving sketch, just double click on the driving sketch, and as you can see, the width of the sketch and this tyre, the width of this tyre, are 130 millimeters. So if we just click on that, we want to turn this one to 250 wide. Now make sure that you have on the right hand side, you select this, and make sure you select this configuration and not all configurations, otherwise you change them all to 250 wide. Hit OK, go to rebuild, and what you'll find is that sketch is now 250 wide, but it's also, because both the tyre and the rim are driven from that sketch, both the tyre and the rim are now 250 millimeters wide. So if we go back to our configurations and go back to the default one, we'll find that the default one is still 130 wide. So what I'd like you to do is to make 4 configurations of different widths. The other thing you can also do is, by changing the height of the driving sketch, you can change the diameter of the rim. So I'd like to see 4 different configurations with different widths and diameters of tyre, and that's it.